Hey everyone, thanks for joining in today. I'm Siddharth Shetty, a volunteer with the iSPIRT Foundation. Building on our previous open house discussions that we've done on balloon volunteering within iSPIRT, the idea behind today's session is to really give you a sense of the broad range of technical challenges that many of us are working on as volunteers, whether it's in the crypto space, related to matters of financial inclusion, related to aspects of health inclusion, public Wi-Fi, logistics, and beyond. And so what we'll have is many of the anchor volunteers within each of these rooms that are building out these public goods talk about where their project is, what are the challenges, and give you a very quick flavor of what their project is about. But to kick things off, we have Dr. Pramod Varma joining us today. Pramod, as many of you know, is the chief architect of a range of the India Stack platforms. He's also the CTO of AkeStep, which is a nonprofit technology learning center, technology-enabled learning platform, and continues to be the chief architect of Aadhaar, DigiLocker, UPI, and recently has even co-founded Beckon, which is a nonprofit open source protocol for hyperlocal commerce. And what we'll now have Pramod talk about is, what does it really take to be thinking about these societal platforms from a technology perspective? How is it different from what a lot of us are used to, which is building products rather than playgrounds in our various company settings, and the thinking and philosophy behind the digital public infrastructure that we're architecting. So it's a pleasure to have you today, Pramod, and over to you.
Hey, thanks, Zane. Thanks, everyone. Wonderful to be talking to all of you. The entire organization, iSPIRT, works on volunteers. So we are all volunteers, no difference here. And been at it for a while, and I don't think we have any ending nearby. So we have a long way to go and building a ton of things. And excited to be speaking to you about today, some of the work today. And I'm sure after my session, the bunch of back-to-back sessions where various volunteers are showcasing their work. So if you look back, we have a theory about building digital public infrastructure, okay, and what's called DPIS, or now some terms like DPG, a subtle difference. Digital public goods and digital public infrastructure. Infrastructure is a runtime. Digital public goods are mostly artifacts like software and data and so on. When you instantiate it, becomes DPI. But what is internet? So internet, if you look back, internet itself was a digital public infrastructure. Infrastructure laid by visionaries, thought leaders who thought the world could be connected, every computer in the world could be connected. And they did not know what the use cases are going to be. They did not imagine, it was simple use cases they could imagine. They did not know that we are going to book transport on internet or bring food delivery on internet or anything else on the internet, gaming on the internet. Today, internet has turned into be our life backbone, right? Because that's how everything is connected. But what the beginnings of are very forward-looking, but simple, unbundled set of elements. The HTTP as a protocol, SMTP as an email protocol, TCP/IP, HTML, W3C standardized HTML. Then there was a browser, and then there was something else, and then dynamic pages, and on and on and on. And then, of course, GPS went public in '99, public domain, it was put into public domain, which allows location-aware services and so on. Then the subsequent evolution. The same idea, but what happened though in the West, it's very important to understand, is that the universities and standards bodies went very slow, and the sort of valley companies like the Googles and Yahoos and all at that time really ran much faster than a standards or a academician could think, which meant that beyond 2000, very, very few public digital goods have been created, right? The payment is not public good. Messaging is not public good. It's completely a walled garden. and so on and so on and so on. Pretty much everything. Commerce is not. Commerce is completely either monopoly or duopoly or few really large platforms and so on. But we in India started with a very different hypothesis there, saying that we cannot stop just with internet. We ought to have a set of unbundled elements of the Lego blocks, if you will, that can dramatically reimagine and create possibilities of applications, solutions for the diversity of India. So India Stack was the origin, and India Stack is precisely what internet did to humanity. India Stack is doing it to India. And it is not something which you take it lightly. Like Aadhaar was an identity platform, and all it did was identity. eKYC on top of that, e-sign, which was a protocol, purely a protocol, and a marketplace could provide e-sign capable services. UPI as a set of payment protocol and a switch, and then Aadhaar-based payments, DigiLocker, which you have probably seen. And if you have not seen any of this, then you are really probably living under the rock. DPA being the data empowerment protocol, and account aggregator being an instantiation of DPA in the financial domain. But what does it mean? None of them, by the way, none of this by itself solves anything. Take Aadhaar per se by itself, or e-sign by itself, or UPI by itself, doesn't solve anything much at all. So we never looked at it as a solution. We looked at it as a Lego block that can be combined to create combinatorial possibilities and imaginations. But building the Lego block is an art. That's why you are here. That's why iSPIRT is being focused on. How do you build a Lego block that is generalized, forward-looking, minimalistic, that can actually combine with other molecules, other building blocks, and create enormously different structures and solutions on top of it. And this is very different from solution building in a traditional approach. The approach has been a lot of people, and a lot of you, by the way, as product guys and engineers, we want to solve. And that temptation of solving is so high that we always think of the whole solution. I want to solve healthcare access. I want to solve lending, access to lending. Solving is what product companies do. That's what we have always been brainwashed to do and brain wired to do. We are engineers, we are builders, we are product guys, we will build solutions. For what? For a particular market space and try to win. So we are on this side. Either government builds a solution or product companies build solution, right? But a lot of times what happens, you go to the right. And now next. Yeah, so you end up building, if you are outside, if you are a product company, you want to get to this side. You want to destroy competition, pretty much. You want to be able to dominate that world, and dreaming of maybe a billion unicorn, then maybe 100 billion, and maybe like large big companies, $1 trillion companies. Walled garden. So your imagination, your way of doing is to create protections to your IP. So you're protecting, you're creating walled gardens, you're after winner take all behavior. So your antennas are tuned to win this in the solution play. But that's not what you do when you think about infrastructure. India has taken a different viewpoint, because we cannot afford a BSNL on the left. It's very important. This is what government, if government does everything, we get a BSNL at Air India on the left. Or you can outsource the whole thing to Amazon, Uber, and so on, and sit pretty back. That's the right side. We need a wanted neither. So we took a middle path, and that's extremely important when you are an iSPIRT volunteer to understand. And where as think tanks, as builders of digital public infrastructure, we are not building products, but we are building that Lego block, one Lego block at a time, which is typically a protocol or a minimal platform, maybe a combination of protocol or APIs and platforms, whatever. Minimalist. That minimalism is very weird, right? As a product guy, you want more features. You're always after a lot more capabilities in the system. When you build DPIs, you're actually minimal. You're thinking minimal. But you are thinking, once you build this, you are orchestrating as a builder of DPI, orchestrating a large ecosystem of solution players around you. You are not the solution builder. UPI, PhonePe was a solution builder, Amazon Pay, Google Pay, and others who embed UPI into their workflows. They're all solution builders. UPI per se, it's just an infrastructure element. So this separation of concerns, where iSPIRT focuses on the green, and then we focus on creating the white, market making the white, creating the playground to create the white, orchestrating that white, understanding their cares, understanding their incentives, and working, pulling and pushing and balancing that act is what we do. And that's why this picture is important. And so when we are building societal goods like digital public infrastructure, we are always looking at, we are not the actor, we are not the player, we are a playground maker. We are not the player. So we are asking the question, who are the players? How do we restore every player's agency, their capabilities? How do we address the diversity of India through an amazing slew of solutions? Because one solution doesn't fit. One education app is not going to solve 250 million children in the schools problem, right? One healthcare app is not going to solve access to healthcare problem. So it's not an app problem. It's not a one solution problem for us. It's about creating a playground so that amazing array of diverse solutions can actually come about. And then once you create the DPI, catalyzing the network, the Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar, and mostly on Bazaar side, but they've never missed the Samaj part as well. It's important that iSPIRT, as iSPIRTers, as builders, we always are catalyzing, orchestrating the creation of that network. Why would market players build on top of UPI? What is their incentive? Why would they build on DPA? Why would they build on account aggregator? Why would they build on OCEN as a lending protocol? Today, many of that will be talked about, but it's important to understand that, right? And then you are solving, actually, you are addressing solvability. You are not solving. As a product, guys, we are all used to solving, engineers. We are not solving. And that is a very hard, big battle we face with volunteers. But we are not yet solving lending problem, because we are thinking the ecosystem will solve it. So our ask is that how do we make the ecosystem vibrant enough that they solve, and incentive aligned enough so that they can solve. So creating that product nation, an amazing array of product companies outside is our ask, and hence building digital public goods and constantly evolving out of that and showing a system leadership. So orchestrating require this picture is that you are not the play, you are not playing everything, and you are orchestrating, you are the conductor. It requires system thinking, system leadership thinking, that you are not, you are actually working for everybody else thinking, right? And empowering with data, ecosystem actors getting all the data so that they can make their own evolution, their own improvements in the system. Next slide, please. And hence, who are we? So so we are very sort of simplistic, actually, of being iSPIRT volunteer. This is a simplistic picture. Our life is crazy and amazing because we are not here to solve, build an app and solve in 5 years. We're not here to create policymakers and VCs are typically our 10-year horizon that they work with. We, iSPIRT, has worked with a 30-year horizon, 20, 30-year, multi-decade horizon. This is like 1970, somebody building TCP, IP and HTTP. And 90s internet, we started experiencing internet. And now it's all internet, right? Humanity's backbone is internet. So it's a 30-year view that we take. That requires a lot different viewpoint. It's about thinking minimalism, thinking infrastructure, thinking enablers, and thinking that we are to be unafraid. And that's very important, because 30 years, you can't copy paste. You don't know 2050. We don't copy paste. Account aggregator was not, DPA was not copy pasted. There was nothing in the world that looked like DPA. There was nothing in the world that looked like UPI. So iSPIRTers are sort of crazy in that sense, that we are unafraid to think big and build digital infrastructure, not solve, as I said. and build a playground. We are always looking out a playground. And at the end of the day, we are absolutely a no greed, no glory. Nobody better than Sharad that who keeps insisting to us and reiterating that to us, saying that there's nothing in us in doing this other than pure joy of building something for the future, and maybe failing, maybe succeeding, but being at it. And I see some of these tracks 3 years, 4 years later, we are still on that bloody track, and we are not getting off that bloody treadmill, because we will make this happen. And it is important that you get onto that mindset of pure joy of building for 30 years, and that dramatically change India's access, affordability, and choice of millions of Indians. And that's what you're after. So I welcome you. You must try. You have to be crazy not to try being part of iSPIRT. But sometimes you have a shorter stint, longer stint. I think iSPIRT opens up very, very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you so much. Thanks. Back to Sid.
That was absolutely inspiring, Pramod. Thank you so much. So this is a broad overview of the volunteer challenges that we'll discuss with you today. Each of the anchor volunteers will give you a quick 2 to 3 minute flavor. And then at the end of this, you can reach out on volunteers.ispirit.in if any of them are of interest. So diving straight in, I'm going to talk to you about WANI, which is the Wireless Access Network Interface. The idea behind WANI is very simple. Today, large parts of India, especially in rural areas, are connected using on the back of fixed line connectivity. But the issue happens at the last mile. How does a consumer then actually access those fiber cables? And today, the entire setup is bundled. One service provider will have to create the box, identify consumers, manage the software which runs the access point, and a whole bunch of that, and manage the software through which consumers connect to it. And as a result, this doesn't scale. And so we do have fiber cables being laid across the country, but very poor usage. And so WANI essentially is a protocol that unbundles various players in the ecosystem and makes it possible for people to do just one part, whether that's provide a Wi-Fi in a box, or just be an app provider, consumer app provider, or just be an ISP that brings the cable to that box. But each one could do that one part and do it very well. And that has gone through a successful pilot with these various market players. And recently, earlier this year, in fact, it was launched by Prime Minister Modi nationally. And we're now looking at scaling it up. And we're particularly looking for volunteers that have a technical background in telecom networks to help contribute towards this effort. So that's a quick overview of WANI. I'd now like to hand it over to Danny to talk about the public-private ledger. Over to you, Danny.
Thanks, Sid. So the public-private ledger started off with the exploration of what would be needed for bringing in, supporting central bank digital currencies, and also helping that crypto currencies kind of increase, used for increased lending in India. But what it has now grown to is something that can effectively support, not just money, not just currencies, but also money supplies, including bank accounts and e-wallets and things like that, and also various other aspects of manufacturing and logistics, including the goods flow and things like that. And how do you tie it all together through a sort of a public infrastructure where we have leaned heavily on what we have seen happening in the monetary space, where cryptocurrencies have really taken a significant initiative and innovated so substantially in terms of the capabilities that they have allowed in terms of programmable currencies. And how do you bring that amount of data sharing, that amount of consistency of understanding of what's happening, and that amount of programmability into the monetary and the manufacturing and logistics, and in general the overall commerce stack within India. So we are building a system which will have a set of wallets which will be agents of each of the companies. They will actually have all the private data. a bunch of notaries who will not actually necessarily have access to most of the private data, but they will infuse trust into the system. So unlike a typically Bitcoin situation where all the data also goes into the public domain, the data is being maintained in the private domain through the wallet operators. But you have a public system to sort of enforce consistency and trust, and then be able to link up a variety of activities such as CBDC, e-wallets, bank accounts, goods flow, and things like that through a creation of standing instructions and contracts. We are in a very, very early days. We are creating the architecture outline and the reference implementation. Very early days right now. I think the things, key areas that we are looking for is, on one hand, obviously cryptography and cryptocurrency technologies, zero knowledge proofs, because we need to understand. I mean, the public needs to be able to trust the private data, and also with respect to, because this is on such a large scale, how do you do distributed consensus management? How do you do high-speed messaging when we try to implement something at that scales at a nation level, and also implementation of smart contracts. Yeah, I just sort of ended on time. Yeah, so the next two projects are very correlated. So the next two ones are, I mean, these three sort of form a family of projects, or rooms, that we use that word. And yeah, over to the next presenter.
Thanks, Danny. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thanks, Sid. Thanks, Danny, for setting up the stage, and hello, everyone. So I'm briefly talking about central bank digital currencies, which is one of the streams that we are working on. And so to briefly understand, while all of us have probably heard something about CBDC, central bank digital currency, in increasingly over the last few years, CBDC is in some sense really the future of money. And if you look at the last 2000 years history of money, that changed many forms, from cowrie shells to precious metals like gold, to paper sometime in the last century, to phone wallet towards the end of last century, and then to cryptocurrency. So we really started on understanding in this exploration on what money is. We realized that it's really just IOU, and then our aim is to figure out how we can convert the cash in the pocket into a digital currency. And like Pramod mentioned, make sure that it is interoperable with all other forms of digital money, and the money and currency are sort of interrelated but different. So for us, it was important to understand what are the global comparisons, and we realized that every country has a different reason for its own CBDC design, and that's what we've been working on for India, for which the imperatives really are about how can we leapfrog financial inclusion, and how can we accelerate the economic growth. How do we unclog many of the friction areas? And that will briefly get talked about in the next slide. So how far along? So right now we've kind of, as earlier presenter showed, we've done the base layer of technical architecture under this new sort of Indian formulation of PPL, and the reference implementation work is ongoing, as well as, so these are the three layers, as Dhananjay mentioned. These are three layers. First layer is PPL, second layer is CBDC, and third layer is smart contracts, which will get talked about. So specifying the top layer is also something that is being explored in the separate stream. So we are actually looking for, in this particular case, volunteers with varied backgrounds and not necessarily just tech. Frankly, we are looking for people with a lot more system design, crypto, obviously, but plus economics and legal fields as well, because this is an interdisciplinary area which includes all of this and brings those together, apart from tech.
Thanks, Sanjay. We'll now have Karan talk about the India smart contracts.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Karan, and I think, like how Danny alluded to earlier, the India smart contract side also fits in really well with the overall concept of distributed systems and permissionless consensus. I think the whole idea of crypto and etc. has really helped us realize the potential of permissionless and consensus-driven systems at scale. But we often see that a lot of this is focused more on the monetary and payment side of it. So an approach we took very interestingly is also figure out how we can look at the entire value transfer life cycle, right? Which is not just monetary in terms of money and payments, which is looked at on the CBDC side, but also in terms of the other side of value, which is your real goods and services, which are actually used. The reason for this is that in our traditional Indian contractual system is relatively poor in terms of settlement failures as well as enforcement. And something in the form of a scalable architecture, it really helps to streamline that in a way that allows you not only to enforce contracts in an effective manner, but also to settle and collect dues, is something that's very useful in a circumstance which allows, greater GDP growth and faster economic liberation for something like for a country like India. How far along are we? I think we're again very early days, working very closely with the whole PPL architecture as well as CBDC, and we're building out the early design principles of smart contracts, looking at existing scaled infrastructure from something like an Ethereum to other digital infrastructures around the world to figure out what works best in the Indian context. What we're looking for in volunteers is very similar to what the CBDC track is. We're looking for people who have experience in cryptographic protocols. We're looking for people who worked on permissionless and community-driven blockchain protocols if possible. But because we're working on real-world on-the-ground problems, I think also understanding the legal aspect of it, the idea of how goods and money flows in supply chain, e-commerce, and other kind of commercial domains is something also which forms a very important aspect of this. So yeah, this is a little bit more about how we're looking at the India smart contracts or smart contracts for India. I'd like to hand it over to the next presenter.
Thanks, Karan. Over to you, Sunu, to talk about PML.
Thank you, Sid. Yeah, this is a discussion on healthcare policy markup language, and the problem specification is as follows. We've generally been dealing with healthcare in the context of insurance-driven healthcare, and it is all about local care, reactive care. Somebody falls ill, and then you give them treatment, and then there's a financial model associated with it. What we want to do is to drive healthcare towards a holistic, well-being oriented structure, where it is about the general wellness level of the whole population rather than in the reactive mode. Now, in order to do that, we have been discussing ways in which you can use gamification to encourage the participants, the doctors, the patients or the subjects, the insurance providers, as well as the diagnostic centers, etc., who are all part of the ecosystem, to work together and drive them towards this holistic, well-being oriented model. And the question is, how do we use policies to do it? How do we use policies implemented in the digital world, right? As on the basis of digital data, right? And how do we incentivize the people to induce behavioral changes to drive them towards this model? So we have looked at the initial design, and we have identified at the current level, we've identified what kind of experiments we would like to do. We have of late identified a specific insurance company whom we would like to partner with, and we have sketched out the first level of the experimental design. And what we need from volunteers are volunteers who are, first of all, interested and enthused by the problem of changing the existing healthcare system, and who can think at the systems level, as Pramod was mentioning, on how to design the policies, what kind of policies will be most effective, how it will translate into the domain of digital data. And then most importantly, as the data starts flowing, right, it could be an experiment over a period of time, let's say a year or so, how do we analyze the data? What are the statistical techniques that we will apply to see how effective these policies are?
Thank you so much, Sunu. Over to you, Anirudh, to talk about the unified health interface.
Thanks, Sid. So hi, I'll be talking about UHI, which is the Unified Health Interface for telemedicine specifically. So what is UHI? It is a platform to connect doctors and patients to interact using telemedicine in an interoperable and sessionless fashion. So one of the key technical challenge that we are trying to solve is basically we want to provide a way for doctors across the nation and patients across the nation to be able to interact through a telemedicine, through a asynchronous fashion by reviewing of lab reports or something using UHI. So basically, UHI weaves together one of some of the Lego blocks that have been talked in the past as part of this discussion itself, which are PHR, doctor registry, which basically revolutionizes the way the telemedicine is happening across the nation. So in specifically in a very interoperable manner. To draw some example along the UPI, where you can make a payment from Google Pay to Paytm without much hassle. We want to build an infrastructure where a doctor using any of the application can connect with a doctor who's using any other application through this interface. So that's like a brief introduction on UHI. How far along are we? We have the basic understanding of the concept that we want to deliver, the use cases and the kind of problems that we want to solve for, and it has already been announced by the PM. Having said that, we're solely from a technical point of view, we are basically figuring out a way to laying down the technical framework and building the system from scratch. So having said that, that's the kind of technical volunteers that we are looking for, who have an experience in designing systems and microservices architecture and have worked extensively on the backend APIs. And of course, they must have a passion to have the belief to impact the millions of Indians who will be using UHI.
Thanks a lot, Anirudh, for covering UHI. And now we'll have Dimple talk to us about e-vouchers.
Hello, everyone. I'll be talking about e-vouchers. So what are e-vouchers? E-vouchers are basically prepaid instruments which can be issued by a payer to a beneficiary. And this is built on UPI infrastructure. And these vouchers enable a beneficiary to redeem them at a predefined list of pays for specific use case. To give an example, let's think of a corporate that wants to, let's say, issue COVID voucher related vaccines to its employees. And these vaccine vouchers can be redeemed at a specific chain of hospitals. How far along are we in this? We are basically evaluating how e-vouchers can be used for government schemes, and what will be the right use case for which e-vouchers should be rolled out first. There has been a recent release by PMO where we are evaluating e-vouchers potential use case for healthcare services. What kind of volunteers are we looking for? Anyone who has experience in designing systems and microservice architecture, along with some familiarity with UPI infrastructure, would be really a great fit for the team. Thanks
a lot, Dimple. Over to you, Sanjay, to talk about the health claims management platform.
Thanks, Sid. So, hello everyone. I would be giving some idea about what the health claims platform is. To give some context, if we look at the current way the health claims are processed, there is a lot of manual effort in that, and there's a lot of friction in that. Somebody might take some scanned document, send it over via mail. Then there is a manual checks, and every pair of insurer and hospitals will have different ways of communicating. The data, the information that are sent are not same for everybody. So this also, the effect of that is that it is not scale anyway, and the cost of the claims processing is very high. Now, if we envision it that the insurance health insurance penetration will be very high going forward in several decades, then something to solve these problems become essential. So what is a health claim platform, therefore? So it's a platform that can exchange claims related information between providers and payers and the beneficiaries based on open standard. It's going to provide open set of APIs for interoperability between the provider and the payers, and open and extensible claims information exchange. So So basically, all the information exchange, the bill, the claims information, they are all going to be based on certain standard that is extensible. Enforces security and privacy in the way the information is exchanged. It will also help a lot of fraud detection capability. Today, this is a big problem in the insurance industry. And not only that, as it scales, as the cost comes down, the idea is basically, can we have health insurance claims for a very small value of insurance values? And can it also works across OPDs? Can it also works across pharmacy purchases? So that's the idea of what the health claims platform can possibly can we reimagine in this way. So how far along are we? We have it's still in early days. We have started thinking about a high-level architecture of various components of the platform, the minimal components, set of components as Pramod articulated. Open APIs for some of the use cases, primarily basic cashless use cases are under review. What kind of technology volunteers we are looking for? Somebody who is passionate to obviously make some changes in the way health claims are done and health informations are used in India. A lot from the technical side, system design, APIs, understands and on the data security side, data privacy side, and a bit of machine learning also in terms of some of the capabilities that we think that health claims platform should have.
Thanks, Sanjoy, for covering that for us. And now we go to Sharad to talk to us about the doctor registry.
Yeah, so one way to look at the future health system is that there will be three kinds of flows. There'll be flows of the patients, and we know how to manage that because patient IDs will be there for that. There'll be flows of health information, and personal health records will manage that. And then there'll be also flow of money, claims, what Sanjoy talked about, or Dimple talked about, E-vouchers would manage that. But, in a way, people who orchestrate these flows, and one of the most important people to orchestrate these flows in a health system are the allopathic doctors and the Ayush doctors. And, it is therefore very important for them to be able to do this effectively, that there is a authenticable, open API-based registry where all of them live, so that they can work with software components, or software components can work with them, on their behalf, to play a role in managing these three flows that I just talked to you about. So this is a goal, important goal of NDHM, National Digital Health Mission as well. NHA, National Health Authority, is focused on that. And so conceptual design of this registry is in place, and we need to polish it, finish it, flesh it out in more detail so that it can quickly be implemented. And the goal is that, and then populate it with real doctors, and both allopathic and Ayush doctors. So this is really where we are. There's a fair amount of experience in iSPIRT and the extended team in building registries. So anybody who wants to come and help out here will have an enormous opportunity to learn. And these are national scale kind of registries. What you learn here would be therefore very significant. So if you're familiar with a microservices kind of an architecture, you're familiar with Aadhaar authentication, then jump in. This would be an interesting project to volunteer for and take it from the stage that it is in to its final completion. So that is the little bit about Doctor Registry.
Thank you so much, Sharad. And now we'll have Vijay talk about the Livestock stack that's being built.
Hey, thanks, Sid. So, hey everyone. I would like to break this particular track into two parts. One is the iSPIRT and then the Livestock. As you all know by now, iSPIRT over the many years have had population scale systems successfully deployed across the country, be it Aadhaar, DigiLocker, UPI, tax, GST systems, and so forth, as an example that has been already touched upon briefly. So the idea of iSPIRT is basically take the three pillars to make these large-scale population systems successful in India, primarily with an India Stack model that got layered in terms of building the technologies. There is this technology component, market, and then the policy architecture. All these three components have to come together to basically make a successful impact to the citizens at scale. So what we are doing in iSPIRT is basically taking all this collective experience as an organization, volunteers that we work together over the years, and then creating a system concern called iSPIRT to share this knowledge out and create more iSPIRTs across the country. And we are working closely with National Dairy Development Board in the Livestock animal husbandry side of the department, and trying to bring this digital infrastructure and goods to the different sector altogether. And considering the voluntary nature of our work, we didn't want to spread too thin, and then trying to bring this equivalent of an iSPIRT at the Livestock infrastructure as an organizational entity, so that it can, as an institution, it can survive in coming decades and make an impact in the totally different sectors that we would like the India to prosper in coming decades. So in that context, Livestock is basically to work with NDDB as a organization and then bring these best practices and make a digital impact on the in the animal husbandry, agricultural sectors as such. So where we are right now is working closely with the department to create an NDLM blueprint, which is in the works and in the final stages of publishing, and also working with the team to help onboard a right partner and then define a reference architecture, which will help scale the system in coming years. And right now we have basically provided the reference architecture and then working with the team closely to help guide the team to make the right decisions across both technology and then policy side of the aspects related to the organization. We are closely looking with volunteers who have worked with similar large-scale systems, so that this platform will definitely give an opportunity to work at scale and primarily using open source. Most of our work that we have done so far, and iSPIRT as a model, we embrace open source and open standards, and this is another opportunity for volunteers to come experience firsthand building population scale systems and deliver something that it has an impact on the livestock area.
Thanks, Vijay. And now we go over to Nitin to talk to us about the data empowerment and protection architecture and its next generation.
Yeah, hello everyone. So like the name suggests, data empowerment and protection architecture. So basically it is empowering the user to share his data, which is lying with a data custodian or a data provider, with a data consumer or a third party agency which is providing some service to the user, and all this with the user consent, right? And the protection is in terms of that how the third party is using the data of the user, and is using it for the purpose which it mentioned to gather the data, right? And so essentially the data will implement the consent layer within the India Stack, and other layers in the India Stack are like the paperless and cashless and the identity layer, which are already being implemented by Aadhaar, UPI, and the DigiLocker, right? So we are calling this as a second generation of DAPA. Reason being that first generation is already live and is in the field, and it's launched by RBI, and it is known more of a name by account aggregators, which is specifically for the financial sector or the financial domain. But within DAPA, we want to make it more generic so that the same architecture can be employed across multiple sectors like telecom, education, healthcare, and agriculture, like so many more, right? And currently we are in the phase of getting the feedback, and we have a lot of learnings from the account aggregator framework, which we are trying to incorporate in DAPA. And at the same time, we are studying multiple frameworks which are already there, which are kind of solving the same use cases, but in a different manner. And there are certain architectural differences, like whom the consent is collected by. Is it by the consent manager or by the data provider? So there are some projects like OpenID Connect with grant management, Solid, TOIP, TPDMS, and open banking. Yeah. And apart from this, internally, we are having debates on like how should we go ahead and implement this DEPA. Like, should it be an old school REST-based APIs, which have already been proven to be scalable massively, like in case of Aadhaar, UPI, or DigiLocker? Or should we go ahead with a blockchain kind of thing, which comes with its own features like immutability and distributed nature? So the kind of volunteers we are looking for is like which have exposure to microservices API, or have a knowledge of OpenID Connect, or any of the frameworks which have been listed above, and the related security threats which arrive due to data sharing across multiple domains, right? So as a suggestion to volunteers, I'll suggest them to go and have the look at these links to get a sense of how much work has been done and what has been put together till now.
Thanks a lot, Nitin. And last but not the least, we have another Siddharth to talk to us about Digital Sky on the logistics side.
Thanks, Sid. So a little bit of intro about Digital Sky. At its very core, it's about programmatic hyperscale air traffic management system for unmanned aerial vehicles, also commonly known as drones. So more broadly defined, it's about creating a digital platform for programmatic end-to-end governance of everything related to UAV operations. So everything from getting your drone registered to getting an ID to permissioning flight plans, and then traffic management, so that you can have swarms of drones sharing the airspace safely and securely. So to give you some context, this is kind of like going from like the security paranoid kind of considering the geostrategic landscape that India is in. We've traditionally taken this kind of overcautious approach to permissioning and allowing drone operations, but we can see that the technology maturation curves for the underlying technologies for drones is hitting a point where we can see beyond visual line of sight operations for massive fleets of autonomous drones is going to become commonplace. And so we want to not just be playing catch up to the rest of the world, but we want to sort of not just catalyze this orbit shift for India, but also be a global standard setter for drone operations. So the idea is that we'll have this very hyperscale sort of public backbone to manage drone operations at scale, so that we can have millions of simultaneous drone operations in India. So how far along are we? The version 1 of Digital Sky launched in 2018. It made it finally easy to legally fly drones. And it also created this sort of detailed airspace map for permissioning with tiered zones of permissioning, such as green, amber, and red zones. But right now we are in the works for putting out a V2. So currently we're exploring things like risk assessment, quantifying the amount of risk for a certain drone operation given a failure mode and so on, and also what is the regulatory pathway for us, and how do we harmonize it and even get ahead of the rest of the world. And what are we looking for in volunteers? We'd like ideally we'd like people with experience in drone hardware, firmware, software like Ardu Pilot and so on. But even generalist software engineers who have who are enthusiasts for drones are welcome.
Awesome, thanks a lot, Siddharth, for covering Digital Sky. And with that, we walked you guys through various challenges on the India stack, on the national health stack, touched upon logistics, and even a iSPIRT effort that relates to the livestock stack. And if any of these challenges are of interest, please do reach out to us on volunteers@iSPIRT.in. where you can actually fill out a form. One of our volunteers, Pratibha, will reach out to you, have a conversation, and then help set you up for success within one of these challenges, whichever seem to be of interest.